Good Monday morning, Justin. How are you?
Wonderful. How are you doing today, Zach?
I'm doing pretty good. I like the way you said that. You made me feel very warm and welcome here. I'm plugged in. That was really nice. Thank you.
Well, you are welcome. And thank you for being here, Zach. But you know what? This weekend was a little bit weird. I did some traveling in my Ionic 5. And today we're going to talk about some of the things I experienced. The three signs that we are not ready for full electrification. But it's great to see
You were
everyone in
out
the chat
traveling
today.
around. You were
Yeah.
out traveling around and you realized, okay, maybe it's a little too soon for everyone to be driving an EV. We've talked about this a bit before on the show, but you had some very acute experiences this past weekend. Let's kick it off though, Justin. What are the three reasons you came up with that we're just not quite there yet?
Yeah. Poor charging infrastructure, EV pricing and accessibility. The pricing is just not accessible right now. And not to mention, if you can afford an EV, it's hard to find one on the lot. But the big one that I'm going to hit on today that we haven't talked extensively about is public education, because I've seen some things this weekend. It was rough.
Well, let's start in order because I know you're going to dive in. I haven't heard, to be very clear here, Justin and I have not talked in advance of this about what he experienced over the weekend. Let's start with infrastructure, though. We've talked about this topic many times, but if you're new to the channel or new to the show, when it comes to the infrastructure needed to be able to charge, I don't know, more than a few million EVs, why not, say 100 million EVs? We're very, very far away from actually having that. The reality is, Justin, that maybe Tesla's in a place where they have that type of infrastructure for their fleet of vehicles, but all the other automakers, they really don't, correct?
Yeah, we're going to kick it off with some doom and gloom and then finish with the silver lining. So,
Okay, I like that.
yeah. Oh man, let me just kick it off by saying that I pulled into an Electrify America station in North Carolina and met a woman and her elderly mother who had just arrived at the station without air conditioning because they were on 0% battery. They had not planned at all for how they were going to get to the next charging station. They had just bought a Kia EV6. They love the car but hate the infrastructure. And honestly, they were a bit at fault for this too, because I mean, who do you blame? Do you blame them? Do you blame the dealer who had just sold them the car for not telling them how to plan for these issues? But anyways, they pulled into a station at 0% sweating.
Wait. I just want to make sure I fully understand. So these folks, a woman and her elderly mother, bought
Yes.
a Kia EV. Is this their first time ever charging it? Is that like what happened here? And they
First
didn't
trip,
know.
first trip with it.
Wow. And
Yeah.
so they show up at the charging station, and you just happen to be there because you're also charging
Yeah.
your car, and they have no air conditioning and they're at 0% battery?
Well, the air conditioning was not like forced off. The cars don't do that because they could get sued for that, But it was an emergency backup or reserve power mode where it said, in order to make it to your charger, turn off your air conditioner. So it doesn't make you turn it off, but yeah, otherwise you'd be stranded on the side of the road.
It
I've
was
never.
hot this weekend on the East Coast,
Yes, it
Justin.
was
That would have
about
been uncomfortable.
92 degrees when that happened. I've never ever had my Ionic 5's battery below like 7% period. It's never been below that. So I can't
Wow.
imagine creeping into an Electrify America station at 0%. But oh man, where do we start? Because I just got to thinking about, how is this the dealer's fault for not properly educating their EVs customers about this, about the lifestyle change? Is it their fault for not doing due diligence and planning ahead? Or is it just charging infrastructure? Because they had just came from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, beautiful beach, lots of people go there, and they said there were no fast chargers except for Tesla superchargers in the immediate vicinity, and they just kind of were winging it. Not a good time to wing it when it's like 95 degrees.
Okay, what's going through my head, and there's a lot going through my head. AAA is going to evolve. Like, it's very clear right now that AAA is going to evolve, and instead of just being like roadside towing, they're gonna figure out a way to show up with, like, here's your gallon of gas. I'm using air quotes if you listen to the podcast. Here's your gallon of gas to get your EV to the closest charger. Like, people are going to have more experiences similar to what you're describing, Justin. And I don't blame the dealer, man. I blame the consumer. I blame the individual at that point. Like, you're buying an electric vehicle going on your first road trip. You gotta educate yourself a little bit, don't you?
Yeah, They had gone as far as installing a level 2 charger in their garage at their home, so they did some preparations. I guess they had no idea that charging infrastructure severely lacks beyond Tesla superchargers. I mean, I just don't know.
Does and Chris has the comment here in the chat, Justin. He says the car will tell you where to charge. I know in Teslas they have that functionality. Do the Kias, Hyundais,
It's
do they have that too?
it's very poor in the Kia Hyundai shared infotainment and navigation platform. I've checked it out. For example, you're ideally looking for a level 3 fast charger that can charge your Ionic 5 or EV6 in 20-25 minutes, maybe 30 minutes if you're at like 0. Um, but whenever I search for the nearest chargers in my car, it automatically just shows me the nearest one, period, even if it's a level 2 slow charger. So I have to have the know-how to be like, no, I don't want to go to that one because that's a slow charger. And I think that's actually what they did, because they told me that they charged at a Nissan dealership on their trip. With the Kia EV6's free charging incentive, I believe it comes with 2 years of free charging at Electrify America. There's no reason you should be going to a Nissan dealership to charge, but that's probably where their navigation system sent them. It's not the best.
Yeah.
Tesla has a big upper hand there.
All right, before we go continue with the doom and gloom, I do want to bring up Learning Fast question. Did you have any trouble charging your Ionic 5 on your trip?
Kinda, sorta, but not really. Let me tell you what that
No,
means. Yeah,
what a
kinda,
good
sorta.
news.
No, well, I loved the car. Like we were honestly heaping praises on how enjoyable the ride was and how less stressful it was to use the it's not autopilot, but it's highway drive assist. It's kind of like Hyundai's
Yeah.
autopilot. We love the car. The only troubles we had at one charging station, my car would not charge at the 350 kilowatt ultra fast stalls at Electrify America, because the Ionic 5, the Kia EV6, the Genesis GV60, is it GV60? Yeah. These
Yep.
cars, they're special because they can charge at the fastest speeds. But what good is that if you are not able to use that, right? So my car was only working at the 150 kilowatt speeds at one of the stations. That was kind of annoying because I know my battery was fully warmed up. I had been highway driving for 30 minutes. But other than that, no, I didn't have any problems.
But let's talk about that because that also plays a role in with your first point of why we're not ready for electric vehicles in everyone's hands. If that mother daughter that you described in their EV6, their new EV6 on their first road trip coming back from Myrtle Beach, if they had arrived at that Electrify America station, and Justin, you've experienced this, we've seen the data that says it's happening. 1 in 5, 1 in 4. What's the number? I forget off the top of my head, but many frequently at Electrify America stations, you do not have fully working chargers. You experience that as well. Obviously, you could still get a charge. What would happen to that poor woman, those two women, if that had been the case? To your
Tow
first
truck.
point, the infrastructure just isn't there.
Yeah, would have been tow truck time. And I also want to touch on what you mentioned, Zach, with AAA. You were like, well, maybe that'll come and save the day as electrification heats up. But we got to keep in mind here there are a lot of limits to that, because if you have one of these mobile charging services come and save you on the side of the road, that's not a quick solution. You're looking at maybe gaining 20, 30 miles of range in about 30 minutes to 45 minutes. This is a slow solution, and it's not going to get you very far. So what is the solution? It's really going to be, oh, it's so important and it makes me nervous. It gives me anxiety. The national charging network, it has to be developed carefully with a lot of redundancy. Engineers need to be front and center. They need to talk to Electrify America and see what the sources of their struggles have been, so we don't repeat that with 500,000 chargers nationwide, and talk to Tesla. I know there's been some controversy because some aspects of the federal government have kind of wanted to pretend like Tesla isn't the EV powerhouse that they are, the EV originators, and they like to talk about GM and Ford, but they don't like to talk about Tesla. They need to be talking to Tesla to see how they have built such a successful charging infrastructure network. That's what we need to have going on, because AAA is not going to save us all. It's not.
Yeah, I completely agree. Justice says rumor is when Tesla opens to everyone, Tesla will come with lifetime free supercharging again. Would be great if their network was available to everyone. Also, Justice, is that the Hulk in your avatar. That's a good looking photo of you two there. I mean, could Tesla really kind of save the day here, Justin? And at what expense to everyone else? Like they're going to find a way to make a ton of money if they open up their network to everyone.
I'm so glad Justice brought that up because that would be almost an instant solution to the problems that I've been mentioning. Is if Tesla, the V4, the version 4 superchargers did become available to everyone. And let's say I just pay the premium to make charging free again for Teslas. That's cool. I'll pay the premium because even in my state of West Virginia, I believe there are 7 superchargers in this small state. So that would be kind of an instant solution. And I can't help but wonder, are those who are planning the national charging network kind of thinking about just saying, maybe we could just avoid this mess, call up Tesla, see if we can work something out and just build out the supercharger network? But I think you and I know the answer to that. So.
Well, every time we read something in one of the industry publications, it's all about how an analyst at Bank of America thinks Tesla's going to lose their market share and GM and Ford are right on their heels when in reality, they're really not. And then you think about it from the infrastructure standpoint, the infrastructure certainly isn't there. You know, Justin, I spent a good bit of my weekend. I was also at the beach, South Jersey, with my dad. It was a great time. And also some of our family friends. And they own the family friends we were staying with, they own Lexus hybrids. That's all they own. So Toyota hybrids, just nicer badge and more expensive. And they own a 2013, a 2011, and a 2009. So they own older, original Lexus hybrid vehicles. And we were talking together about the miles per gallon that they get. All of those vehicles, two of them SUVs, one sedan, all over 30 miles per gallon combined. We're talking a 2009, 2011, 2013. And I look at what your options are then on the EV side and the challenges that you're going to have to deal with. And why wouldn't you just go with the hybrid at that point? And we see some of the automakers out there, like Toyota, for example, continuing to put their foot down and say, okay, hybrid is the future. A long-winded way of saying Tesla has this head start. People who are in positions of power don't want to really give them the credit that they deserve. And then there are some sleeper players in this EV space who are saying, you know what, screw it, let's go with the tried and tested hybrid technology. And then I talk to consumers, like my family friends. They're perfectly fine with that because it gets them from point A to point B and it saves them money.
Yeah, and I like to think of myself as quite pragmatic and a realist. And honestly, as much of an EV enthusiast as I am, there's a lot of truth to what you just said. It would make a greater impact if, let's say, the national average fuel economy went from 25 miles per gallon, where it is today, to 45 miles per gallon. That would make a bigger impact than going from 5% EV market share to like 15% EV market share. Because I don't know, this is wild. Now we got to think about the automakers' bottom lines too. Because I was just chatting with Ray, good old Ray Shefska. We love Ray.
We love Ray.
And we were talking about how Ford recently came out and said that they're no longer making a profit. They're no longer turning a profit on the Mustang Mach-E.
Hmm.
This is all because of raw material prices skyrocketing through the roof. I mean, a Ford executive said that themselves. So, talking about these hybrids, I mean, are the automakers having any regrets about this? I'm sure there's a lot of division among the executives and engineering departments thinking about, is this the right choice for the future? But we must keep in mind that a lot of their market share is in Europe. And in Europe, they're going to be banning combustion powertrains no matter what within the next 10, 15 years. So I think they're kind of in a bind where they got to go electric, even if they end up regretting it at all. But hey, I'm an EV fan, so it is what it is.
Let's dig into the other 2 points that you brought up. So infrastructure is one of them, and quite frankly, we didn't even get into like I don't know how the power is being created that's going to go into the battery to keep it charged. I saw Susanna had a comment about solar. There's also nuclear. There's hydro. I mean, there's so many different options for how you coal, of course, as well. We'll save that for another show, maybe where we get into all the different power options and what their footprint actually is. But let's talk a little bit about pricing and accessibility. And then let's dive back into whose responsibility is it for this public education? Are we going to be looking at like high school classrooms where they should be freaking teaching how to buy a car in those damn high
Yeah.
school classrooms? But will they be teaching people about, I don't know, how electric vehicles work because it's so different? Or are we all going to be like New Jersey where we can't pump our own gas? We have someone else who hooks it up. Let's start though. Pricing and availability. Justin, last month, and we're about 2.5, 3 weeks away from getting the latest data. an electric vehicle, a new electric vehicle average transaction price was $67,000 when the average new car transaction price was about $46,000. They're just too expensive for most people to buy.
Yeah, and we also got to keep in mind that the desirable EVs, the ones that have the best range, the fastest charging, they're going to be the ones at the high price points that are out of reach for most Americans. If you want to buy an affordable EV, sure, you can get one that takes an hour and 10 minutes to charge for like $30,000. It might have 240 miles of range. The range isn't the big problem, but are we going to end up in a world where those who are driving electric, if they're on a budget, they're not going to be able to travel often because they have to charge for such long periods of time? So there's a lot of inequities among the inaccessibility of EV pricing that are just so nuanced, and honestly, it's quite distressing. But do we have hope
Well,
for
it
the
is
future?
because there's so much money being invested into it, and you have Ford executives saying, "Well, we don't even make money anymore on the Mach-E." It's not like prices are going to come down anytime
Yes.
soon. What does economies of scale really matter when you're mining rare earth metals that you can't just produce more of? Like, no, like it doesn't matter.
Yeah, like you can't really repeat what Tesla did successfully. I mean, they almost went bankrupt a few times, but Tesla started with the high margin, low volume vehicles and then used the proceeds from that to, engineer, develop and bring to market the Model 3 and now the Model Y. You can't really repeat that when a recession is likely already started. You've got car prices, not just EVs, but car prices, going through the roof with the bubble may be bursting, and then that's going to make EV buyers cautious of spending so much money on a new car. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know, Zach. It's just a weird place to be in, especially when you've got all these projections saying EV market share will be over 30% by just a few years' time. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm really starting to think that there's been a lot of overhype for how far we're going to get into the EV world. And this is why I'm so bullish on hybrid powertrains. I think you're going to see hybrids account for more and more and more of what consumers purchase and what ends up on the roads. EV has its time and it will be there. But for the two reasons we've addressed fully, those are two that are going to be holding it back. The third is this public education piece. Obviously, this show, the articles you write, the work that we're doing to try and educate people about electric vehicles, that's a third component that is a sign that we're not ready. There's a lot of challenge to adopting a new technology. The story you shared from this past weekend, the mother-daughter driving back from Myrtle Beach, is a perfect example of that. It's not a good look if when you're driving down Interstate 95 here on the East Coast and you just see like EV graveyards of cars that have run out of charge because people are confused. I mean, that would not be a good look. And I'm not saying that's like around the corner per se, but folks need to know how to take care of these vehicles because it's also probably, and you keep me honest here, probably not beneficial to put the EV into limp mode all that often as well.
No, it's not good for the battery. Not good at all. Um, Recurrent Auto with their basically Carfax of EVs, that's going to really become more and more important. Where for those who don't know, Recurrent Auto is offering a way of using machine learning to monitor your battery's health so that if you ever put it on the market, say someone's looking at your used EV thinking about buying it, they can access the battery's health information before deciding whether or not to make that purchase. And that's going to become more and more important because I'm seeing out on the streets, out in the real world, I'm seeing a lot of people who do not know how to treat their EV well. And this kind of leads us into the third point, which is public education, and whose responsibility is that?
Well, and also when you start to see more of these electric vehicles proliferate on the used car market, yeah, it is. I'm gonna want to look at a Carfax, but a different type of Carfax. Like someone's gonna have to educate me as a buyer of what I should look out for in a used car. And these EVs, these new EVs, are more connected than ever before, so we should have access to that data. But how do I interpret it? How do I know if someone took good care of it? That honestly, that makes me nervous. Like no one, I mean, I guess Recurrent is doing the work, but I don't know of anyone else who's doing that work to help try and educate consumers before they go and spend tens of thousands of dollars on these things. Not to mention, and I know there's some examples, and Tesla's the one, these warranties on the batteries. 8 years, 100,000 miles. I was talking about that this weekend with family and friends. What happens after that? Like there, to me, there's huge open questions there. The man, and this is a guy who's on his iPhone and on his MacBook Pro right here. This freaking MacBook Pro, man, 2 years, 2 years on the dot, the battery just sucks at this point.
Mm,
Like, and we all have experienced that. Have you
yeah.
experienced that
Yeah,
before?
with my iPhone, honestly.
Okay, so like what's going to happen after 8 years at 100,000 miles? And a third
Oh,
thing,
man.
Justin, for you to react to. I'm going off this morning. Sorry. Spent too much time with my dad this past weekend. Could Apple be doing things behind the scenes? Like, remember when the first smartphones came out, like the Palm Pilot and things like that? They let everyone else go make a bunch of mistakes, then they came out. I would not be surprised if we're like 2 or 3 years away from Apple coming out. Watch everyone else like essentially create the first smartphones, the first flat screen TVs. Like then they're going to come out once the tech's a little further along, put their spin on it. I'm gonna mute myself so that you can talk. But there's a lot of passion this morning.
Oh, maybe we'll get to the Apple thing. The short answer is yes. I think we know they are working behind the scenes because they've hired plenty of people for mobility efforts. They've hired some from Tesla. But oh man, I gotta bring up a story from a different charging station because I don't maybe Kia, maybe this is a Kia problem.
Hmm.
Is Kia killing EVs? Because at a different charging station, there was another driver with an EV6 who was trying to figure out how to get the CHAdeMO, which is the Nissan Leaf's connector, trying to get
Yeah,
that to fit into their EV6's charge port. Now, I don't blame anyone if they don't know what a CHAdeMO connector is, but at Electrify America, you've got a bunch of CCS, basically standard charging connectors. It's what every EV except Teslas use. And then you've got the Nissan Leaf, which is the only EV that still uses an outdated, older type of connector called CHAdeMO. So this poor driver's sitting there just trying to figure out how to connect the wrong charging plug into their car, and I had to go tell them like that's not the right one, and they had no idea. Like I don't know, it's just I see struggles out there, and I'm thinking if these are the early adopters like myself, and we're seeing this many struggles with so much money being invested, like when's it going to get better? And then I can't help but think about what's the buying experience like. Was the dealership telling these consumers what they need to know for EV adoption? They're probably not on YouTube all day like we are learning about EV lifestyle stuff. And
definitely not. Yeah, definitely not.
I mean, if we're talking about a national charging network, do we need to have like a national education initiative to go along with this, where maybe you have some kind of signage at the charging stations showing like what you need to do?
Maybe,
I
maybe.
don't
I
know.
mean, trust me, like these things give me pause, but honestly, I'm going back to it. Susanna says Apple needs to figure out how to increase their battery life in their watch first. Like, can we just
Yeah.
you're the expert here. And I know there's some real engineering experts in our chat.
Yeah, Mark is
Someone
here.
explain to me. Yeah, Mark, you're here. My girlfriend Laura, she wears her Apple Watch all day long. She's a personal trainer. She's up, she's walking around, tracks her. And like once a week, she'll come to me and she'll be like, "Oh, Apple's telling me like they haven't tracked my sleep to like help me optimize my whatever." But she's like, "But I can't because it's dead. Like I have to charge it overnight."
Hmm.
That product doesn't freaking work the way it's supposed to. Susanna's hitting the nail on the head. What happens to these damn cars, man, when the same thing happens? Like, I'm not saying it's gonna be 2 years down the line, but you got to be pretty naive to think that like the breakthroughs have been big enough that this isn't going to happen down the line. Then they're used cars; they get flipped and sold. Um, it's just, yeah, look at this. It's a stupid freaking watch, and it has to be charged daily. Ugh.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna ask our wonderful viewer Mark in the chat if you know anything about why these devices have such poor battery life. But what I'm gonna say is that we also badly, badly need to ramp up recycling infrastructure for electric vehicle batteries, or finding a better way to integrate these used EV batteries into other uses, other extended lives, like for example, home battery backup. That would be nice, right? But that's not a solution to the question that you're asking me, Zach. I don't know. I mean, what if I save $10,000 in fuel over the next decade, and then I have to spend $10,000 on a new battery?
Yeah, seriously. Let's look at
I've
this
thought about
comment
that.
here from let's look at this comment here from Paul. The charging experience on the road is so uneven. I downloaded 3 new apps to manage the various charging networks this past week on a road trip to New Jersey. Myself and others all struggled with chargers.
Yes,
Yeah. I mean,
I
you're
feel your
seeing that
pain.
firsthand.
Yeah. The only reason I rarely struggle is because I'm literally an uber nerd when it comes to EVs and all things EVs. So for the average American driver, or in any nation, Honestly, it's a huge learning curve. Another thing that I find is that EV adoption is quite easy if you are charging at home. Just plug it in while you sleep, it charges, wake up, you've got enough to drive the next day. It only gets weird when you travel. So, another thing to consider is that Americans who travel either for their work or just they have plenty of free time, I want to travel all the time. They're going to be feeling the pain of EV adoption more than others. So, I don't know. It's just when I go on trips, it's a hassle. When I stay home, I get to forget about it.
For sure. All right, Mark's in the chat here. They want smaller, lighter, and increased AH. They are narrowing the amount
Amperage.
of energy. Amperage, thank you. They are narrowing the amount of energy extracted to protect the risk of thermal runaway.
Thermal runaway means overheating and fire. Yeah, don't want that. Shout out to Chevy Bolt.
So here we go. I just want to comment on this from Paul because he says there is zero fast charging in New Jersey, south of Atlantic City, zero fast charging in most of Delaware compared to neighboring Maryland. Paul, I was literally in Atlantic City, not Atlantic City, but just south of Atlantic City this past weekend. There's nothing out there. And you know, I actually saw, I forgot to take a picture. I saw I guess is it the Fisker? Was that the like original sports car, electric sports car? Was it
Yeah,
Fisker or Karma? I'm trying to
Fisker
remember.
Karma, yeah.
Fisker Karma. I saw a
Yeah.
Fisker Karma in blue metallic paint. Crazy looking, man. Truly crazy looking. Charging at someone's home, obviously.
Ah, nice. Yeah, that's a plug-in hybrid sports car. Pretty cool.
Yeah, that thing
Oh,
was
so
pretty
so
sick.
I'm guessing that in New Jersey, south of Atlantic City, there are probably Tesla superchargers. You know what? I think I'm going to
Yeah,
start
you're
a
probably
movement.
right.
I'm going to start a movement to get Tesla to open up their network quickly to everyone. Um, the government's gonna foot the bill, I'm guessing. I don't know. Someone's gonna foot the bill. It's not me. But the more that I think about it, the more that you and I talk about it, that's kind of the solution to our problems because Tesla has figured it out. They deserve the credit for being the EV originators, and what better way than to give them the credit than to pay them a premium for non-Tesla drivers like myself to be able to use their network. The
Do
rumor
we
is that the V4 superchargers are going to be capable of supporting CCS, which is what other EVs use.
That was going to be my question. John asked at Universal Connector. Susanna mentioned at Universal Connector. Is that a
Yes,
bit of what we need to see happen here as well?
for sure. And that's a part of the official directive for what they're investigating for the National Charging Network. But because Tesla has such a dominating market share, um, I don't think it's going to be something that they like. I don't know. It's not going to be a priority because 3 out of 4 buyers still choose a Tesla. Tesla's not the CCS standard in Europe and worldwide. CCS is basically becoming the charging standard, but because of Tesla, I don't know. It's kind of the ball's going to kind of be in their court. What are they going to do? And Justice, I want to know what you think. Let us know in the chat. Is Tesla going to open up the supercharger network before 2025? Let us know, Justice.
That'd be quick. That'd be quick. Learning fast checked. No Tesla superchargers south of Atlantic City. If you have been to south of Atlantic City, you'd probably be able to piece together why that's the case. There's like just a bunch of beach towns. There's no real reason.
Mm.
Well, I guess there is a real reason for those that commute back to Philly and whatnot. And we've got here Justice saying there's 500 charging stalls in the county of Sacramento. So infrastructure is unevenly distributed throughout the United States. For the that's the least of it.
Yeah, it's going to stay that way for some time. We're going to start to see the first installations of publicly funded chargers from the National Charging Network funding that came out of the bipartisan infrastructure bill starting late this year, early 2023, which is just around the corner. So it's very unevenly distributed right now, but I think we're going to start to see some changes. I know my own state of West Virginia. They released last week the official plan for how they're going to spend the millions of dollars that they've received from this funding. And maybe in another show soon, Zach, we'll talk about it. Maybe Justice and I will
I'd
talk
love,
about it. It's
yeah, I'd
full
love
of
to hear
weird
your take on that.
information. Yeah, like the way that they gathered this information and condensed it and tried to convey it in a way that the state level legislatures could kind of understand what they're doing. It's kind of fascinating. We should definitely talk about that.
Yeah, we totally should because they're the ones that are shaping what the future of our infrastructure looks like. It's in the hands of the state governments. So yeah, I would love to spend some time digging into that. That being said, for today, let's call it a show. I'm going live with Pops with Ray Shefska, as you mentioned, in about 30 minutes over on the Ray and Zach channel. We got some unfortunate news from Honda, more production cuts there. Hyundai, Kia, their sales were way down last quarter because of inventory issues. So we're going to talk about that and dig into it. We'll be back on Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. Pacific. Between now and then, Justin, I think we'll find some fun things that we can chat about and share with the folks who are listening and joining us.
Yeah, for sure. We'll see what $300,000 EV is announced next, and we'll talk about that on Wednesday.
Can't wait, Justin. I'll see you then.